10. Apologies to those members of the public who are both here and who may be listening in that we've had for technical reasons to start at 10:15 instead of the usual 10 o'clock. This is the Planning Committee for Friday the 14th of February. And the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence. I'm going to report that I think for the first time since I've been here, there are no apologies for absence. And we have a full house, so well done, everybody. The minutes of the previous meeting, I've had a look through those. They seem all right to me. I'm happy to move them from the chair. Is anybody happy to second it? Has anybody got any comments on the accuracy of the minutes? All those in favour of adopting them? Anyone against? That is carried. Thank you very much. No urgent business. Public participation will occur as we go along. Declarations of interests. We should all have received an email from Mr. Marriott, the agent for the Lytton application, agenda item 6. Has anybody else got any other declarations of interest? Ken.
Thank you, Chair. It's a personal issue that goes back a long way and isn't really prejudicial as far as I'm aware. But the Snitterton item, agenda item 7, I was a resident of the bungalow there for a few months in 1982-83. It's a long while ago, but just in case, I thought I would note it.
And you would have had an interest in a slurry pit, wouldn't you?
If it had existed in 1982, yes, but...
I can assure you they did. Okay. Anybody got any other declarations of interest? No, thank you very much. So can we then move on to... Sorry, agenda item 6, Swallowcroft Farm, Lytton. An interesting report that reveals something I never knew before, which was that Lytton was the centre of the hosiery industry in this part of the world. So I don't want any member or officer to tell me to put a sock in it. Hannah, you're going to introduce this for us, please.
Thank you, Chair. This is an application that seeks to vary Condition 2 on an existing planning permission which was granted at Swallowcroft Barn for its conversion to a market dwelling. The application seeks to introduce a larger lean-to across the north elevation of the barn and in-roof mounted solar panels on its principal south elevation. Just get to the right slide, sorry. Yeah, so this is the application site you can see here. The barn is to the south of Lytton, which is due to the north. This is Hall Lane, which runs around the north side of the barn and it continues south in the direction of Cressbrook. You've also got public rights of way to the northeast, southeast and to the northwest. The conservation area boundary, just so you know, it runs along the north side of Hall Lane and it does extend south to include the application site. This is a site as existing, so you can see the barn and you can see there is an existing lean-to shelter on the north elevation. This is a scheme that was approved under the existing planning permission, so you can see that lean-to shelter removed in its entirety and replaced with a smaller lean-to extension. And now this is the proposed, so a new larger extension on the north elevation and solar panels on the south roof slope. That's just an existing cross-section of the barn, so it shows a bit of detail of the roof and the lean-to. They're the existing floor plans. This is what was approved, so just note there were 4 bedrooms at first floor and now proposed, so you've got a larger ground floor in the lean-to. One of the bedrooms is moved to the ground floor level, so you've got 2 bigger bedrooms. This elevation is recessed slightly, so there's a bit of a canopy there. That's the existing principal elevation and the proposed, so that would be a stone slate roof. I think I said proposed, that's what's approved, sorry. And this is what's now proposed, so solar panels on the roof. That's just the roadside elevation as existing, as approved, so there you can see the length of the lean-to. And this is what's now proposed, so it's much longer, extending across most of the elevation. And it's also got black timber cladding on the walls. It's an existing side elevation. This was the approval, so you can see it's a stone-built lean-to. And the proposed, so again, now you can see the east elevations recessed slightly with a bit of a canopy. and this is just from the west. That's the principal elevation of the barn as existing, which members will have seen on site yesterday. You can see it's a traditional building with limestone walls. This is the east elevation from Hall Lane, the roadside elevation, and that's the west elevation. This is taken from one of the public rights-of-way to the southeast of the site. And this is one of the rights-of-way which is further east, so you can see there's quite a distinctive landscape to the south, it's a medieval strip field system, so that doesn't form part of the conservation area, but it does form an important part of the setting. This is from another right-of-way to the west of the site, looking towards Hall Lane, and that is from the south on Hall Lane, so again you can see that quite distinctive landscape, and the barn is quite prominent in the views. So there are some concerns with the changes as proposed. There are concerns that the lean-to and the panels would harm the character and appearance of the non-designated barn, of the conservation area and setting. There are concerns that the larger lean-to is more substantial in scale than what is already there and what was approved, and more domestic in its appearance, and it would harm the legibility and agricultural character of the barn. And the panels would be a modern addition to the principal elevation of the barn, which would be at odds with the traditional character of the building. Our climate change SVD does strongly advise against providing panels on principal elevations of buildings. So there's concern that that harm to the character of the barn would be experienced within the site and also within the wider setting. As you can see there, that the barn is very prominent in the landscape. So that harm would arise towards the barn and the conservation area and setting. And it's not felt that the public benefits identified would be outweighed by that harm. There's also a concern that the changes do undermine the existing permission, which was to conserve the character and appearance of that barn, due to the harm that's been identified. So the proposal as varied wouldn't continue to meet that exception for creating an open market dwelling under policy HE1. So the recommendation is therefore for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. Right, we have three speakers. The first I've got Mr. James Smith. Have we got the speakers in the right order, by the way? Right, Mr. Smith, I don't know whether you've been here before, but there's a little button somewhere there which will turn a red light on. Thank you very much. And when you're settled and ready, you have three minutes in which to address us.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you all today. Just in response to some of the comments, I'd just like to clarify that the references to applying for an extension aren't quite correct. We're applying to transform the existing lawful lean-to structure that is evidenced to have been there for at least 77 years and predates the designation of the Peak District National Park. As a bit of background to our planning process so far, we submitted our first application for the conversion of the barn in December 2021. We believe we designed this in a very sympathetic manner to how the building stands now. After a very long and drawn-out process, we eventually agreed an option with the planning officer at the time to knock down the lean-to and rebuild half of it in stone with a blue slate roof. This was on the basis that the agricultural heritage of the lean-to was less important than revealing the hosiery heritage of the stone barn. It is agreed by all that the hosiery assumption isn't correct, and therefore the heritage of the whole structure, including the lean-to, is derived from agriculture. The decision by the planning officer was made in June 2023, some 18 months after we submitted our original planning application. As I'm sure you can appreciate, we were exhausted by the whole process and so begrudgingly accepted the decision offered as it secured approval for the change of use to a dwelling. We have lived in Lytton for nearly 9 years now, and many villagers spoke to us after the planning decision was received with bemusement as to why we were only allowed half of the lean-to structure when they have only ever known the building to have stood in its current form. One such village member even took it upon himself to do his own research and came across an aerial photo of Lytton on the Historic England website. This photograph was taken by the RAF in April 1948 and shows the barn and full-length lean-to structure as it stands today. Up until this point, we had been led to believe that the lean-to structure was a late 20th century addition. Throughout the whole planning process, planning officers have been of the opinion that the lean-to should be removed because they believed it to be a modern structure that was obscuring the view of a stone barn. We now know this isn't a modern addition, so this reignited our desire to apply for the retention of the full lean-to. Lytton Village is very much characterised by farming. It has 3 large farms, and these farms have large agricultural buildings that are clearly visible from the barn and Hall Lane. Our proposal of transforming the existing lean-to structure into something that is suitable for residential purposes whilst maintaining its visual appearance is in keeping with the local vernacular. After all, the existing structure has stood there for at least 77 years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the second speaker we have is Emma Smith.
To follow on from my husband, I couldn't be more local to this barn. I was born in Lytton, and with the exception of my time at university, I have lived within 2.2 miles of it my whole life. We hope to convert the barn ourselves, putting a massive amount of time and effort into doing so, and I see this as our one opportunity to get it right and create a home for our family with versatility and longevity. We started our family in Lytton, and we are privileged to already be embedded within the lovely village community. We've settled in the village, and that is where we mean to stay because we love it. Our hope is to grow our family at the barn, IVF allowing, but on the horizon for us, having started our family a bit later in life, is the fact that my husband's parents are ageing, don't live close by, and it's foreseeable that we will need space for them to come and live with us whilst our children are still at home. Utilising the existing footprint of the lean-to would provide us with the space for an accessible downstairs bedroom, which would mean that they could come and live with us when the time comes. This would grant my children precious time close to their grandparents whilst ensuring us all space to thrive. We know we will be extremely lucky to call the barn our home, and we are planning on living at the barn for the rest of our lives. So we need to consider all the possibilities the future holds and make sure the home we create can see us through all the seasons of life. That is why we are so keen to retain the whole of the existing footprint of the lean-to, as that will undoubtedly give us the most flexibility for the future. I can't understand how the perceived planning gain of revealing a stone wall that can only have ever been visible for a period of 40 to 60 years, but has definitely been covered by the lean-to for nearly 80 years, potentially double the time it was ever exposed, can matter more than creating a family home in our small village that is large enough for multi-generational living. I hope you can see that our scheme only asks that we smarten up and make habitable the space that is already built, the barn and lean-to that currently stand there, and that our plan has always been to keep the converted barn visually as close as possible to what you saw yesterday. Just hopefully a bit warmer and drier. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. And Nick Marriott to finish off.
Following on, solar panels. Policy CC1 requires the best possible carbon reductions. This is a very high and aspirational bar to set because, by definition, if we omit them, we're only achieving desirable carbon reductions. Officers are concerned that they are a domestic feature and you'll be able to see them, and therefore it can't be supported. Solar panels are not a domestic feature. They make a positive contribution that tackles the climate challenge across all building types. To encourage positive uptake, the government relaxed PD rights to encourage the installation of solar panels. However, in granting consent for the original permission, PD rights were removed, thus precluding it in this case. However, and it's important, the fact is, as of right now, the applicant could install solar panels on that roof under permitted development Part 14 Class J. When the government relaxed the legislation, they also identified many situations, some specifically with regard to the national parks, where it was not appropriate to install them. The proposed location is not one of those identified locations. So the question I ask you is simple. If the government concluded this is a location where PV should be acceptable within national parks, surely you need very good justification to turn your back on that guidance and your own best possible aspiration. The lean-to may not represent the normal building type that we all covet, but it does represent the vernacular. The term vernacular is relentlessly misinterpreted as being built of natural stone or under a pitched slate roof, when in fact its meaning is much broader and describes simple buildings constructed locally by craftsmen to suit a specific local purpose and need. This whole building was built by a farmer for their farming purposes. It is entirely vernacular and has merit. It is an important element of the barn and how it has functioned historically. The only logic being offered for its removal is that it isn't built of limestone. In my opinion, that is not reason enough to simply demand its removal from the composition. The building form, composition, context, call it what you will, has been like that for its entire known history. There is also substantial support for its retention within the community. Indeed, only voices of support have been heard. The officers have argued that the proposal is domestic in appearance and betrays the agricultural heritage of the group. We differ on that point. The solution is designed to retain the utilitarian detail of the existing structure and the dominance of the stone element. I would argue that if the lean-to is not retained, I'll come back to that word, the resultant space will take on an overtly domestic feel. Turning back to the word retained. The officers have questioned whether we are retaining or replacing the lean-to. One more sentence, if I may. For clarity, it is the intention to remove and replace the lean-to. Our assertion is that it is the group, the context, the composition within the landscape that is important. It is the group setting and historic composition we seek to retain and enhance. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right. Can I just clarify this point about the... It is clearly an alteration from the original planning permission, but the point that was being made is that actually what we're talking about here is retaining, in essence, something that's already here now. And it's in that context that we should be viewing this application. Can I get that one clear?
Yeah, so just to clarify that there is a lean-to shelter there at the moment, that would be removed in its entirety. So the existing approval does permit an extension to the building, and this application is proposing to increase the size of that extension. So it is being considered as an extension to the barn, and the changes to the character of that lean-to as well.
Well, can we just think about that another way around? If they simply reapplied for this as a new application, afresh, making use of this extension as part of it, we would have to consider it in the context of the building as it is now, wouldn't we?
Yeah, we'd still take that into account. The concerns are with the proposal that what is there is quite a lightweight agricultural shelter, whereas this is more solid domestic lean-to extension, and it is an extension which our conversions SPD says usually does require strong and convincing justification for conversion of historic buildings.
We look at the building as a whole, don't we? Not just the individual bits of it. Taking the building as a whole, I mean, I'm trying to pick up the point and understand the answer to what we've just been told. You take the building as a whole, as it is now, and view that on its merits. I mean, we're not in a position to insist upon the corrugated iron extension being demolished. We have to look at that on its merits in the context of the building as it is. No, I'm struggling a bit with this. So.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, the existing building is what it is, and
Yes.
we have to take that as it is. And essentially, we have to decide whether what the scheme is proposed now is acceptable on its merits. It is a Section 73 amendment application, but we have to consider whether it's acceptable.
Yeah.
Our normal SPD is for conversions is usually the historic part of the building is clearly acceptable to be converted. As you can imagine, as members will have seen from lots of sites, quite often historic barns have got bits and pieces tacked onto them over time. Some maybe 80 years ago, some maybe 10 years ago. The design guide is that it's not necessarily appropriate for all of those elements to be kept. Sometimes it's better for those elements to be removed to reveal the building and to enhance it that way. And there is a policy requirement for development to achieve conservation and enhancement of the building, and our SPD talks about that as well. But ultimately, it's a matter of judgment for members to decide how much of significance that lean-to is. Should it be kept, or is it better to remove it and reveal the barn? And bearing in mind, we aren't keeping the existing structure necessarily, we are removing it and putting another one up. So is the design of what's proposed acceptable? That's the judgment that members have got to reach today.
Or is it better just to make use of it, if you see what I mean? Yes, okay. Right, members. Sorry. Right, Rachel.
Can I just ask for a point of clarification on the point that Nick raised about the solar panels and the government's legislation regarding national parks? Thanks.
So yeah, under permitted development rights, you can put solar panels on non-domestic buildings within some limitations. If the applicant wanted to, because they haven't implemented their planning permission, they could put solar panels on the existing sheet roof. Yes, they could do that. But this is a development as a whole, so the proposed solar panels are part of the conversion, which includes replacing the roof with solar panels. So the whole thing in its entirety does need planning permission. The other thing I'd say about considering government permitted development rights, they're set at a very general level, and we're considering a very site-specific issue here in the national park, so we have to assess it on that basis, rather than necessarily saying, well, the government must have been right and conceding that point. There isn't a fallback to carry out this conversion with those solar panels. That all does need planning permission.
Right, okay. I've now got Ken Smith and then Kath Potter.
Thank you, Chair. If I can pick up on a number of points that have been made in the course of conversation to date. Originally, the building was thought to be part of a hosiery manufactory. That was done in good faith, and a planning permission was granted. It now transpires that it wasn't a hosiery factory, apparently, but nevertheless, it remains a non-designated heritage asset, as it was previously. What the function of that that building was, relatively speaking, I would suggest is immaterial. It is a non-designated heritage asset. The benefit of the existing permission, as far as I'm concerned, is that the ruinous corrugated lean-to would have been removed. Only part of the north-facing elevation of the building would have been masked by the permitted development, which means that part of that building would have been revealed, would have been observable as a converted farm building. And that's the purpose of our considering conversion of what are effectively traditional farm buildings and often redundant farm buildings, is to conserve them in the landscape and to enable their previous functions, their construction and the rest, to be observable to members of the public who can pass by on the footpaths and the roads that are in the vicinity of this building. So the benefit, what is being proposed, means that the continued obscuring of that north elevation would be the result. I think that what we also have to bear in mind with respect to the solar panels issue, that contrary to the flavour of what has been said, we're not against the use of solar panels. What we're against in this situation is the location of the solar panels, because as has been demonstrated on the site visit yesterday and the illustration that is on the screen, in fact now, it's a very prominent building. It is possible to incorporate solar panels into this development in a way that makes them discreet and non-intrusive in the overall landscape. It's not a case that we're saying we're against solar panels per se. I've read the issue of future use and long-term objectives for the use of the building has been raised as well. And I'm just mindful that in so many of the responses that the planning inspectors make on appeal decisions is that they have to consider the situation as it exists now. We can't second guess And I think as a planning committee, we shouldn't be second guessing what the situation might be in 10, 15, 20 years, or even 20 months' time. We have to take the situation as it is now. And that's what that first, the existing planning permission, as far as I'm concerned, has done. So I think what we're looking at, Chair, is a building that is prominent in the landscape, is prominent in the views from footpaths and other public rights of way. And it seems to me, or from my personal perspective, what is being proposed in terms of a replacement on the north side is inappropriate materials, inappropriate design, and I just don't think it's appropriate for the nature of this building. And I can't support the application. I would support the recommendation from officers.
Thank you very much. I've got Kath Potter next, and then Matt, and then Bill. Kath Potter.
Well, I can't support the recommendation. With 2,650 barns in this national park, to me they are works of art. When I think of the men, how they laboured in adverse conditions, in adverse weather, really out in the wilds, and they built these wonderful barns, and to me they are treasures to be kept and to be looked after. So I am in total disagreement with anyone else who thinks otherwise. I'm sorry, but I think they're wonderful. And I am taken back some years ago to Sir Richard Fitzherbert, who put in for his, where there are tea rooms at Tissington now, that was a barn, and he wanted to put PV tiles on it. And the lengths he had to go to get those PV tiles was phenomenal. Now, I've had PV tiles since 2008, and I think we are amongst the first in the area to have had them. So I know the value of them. Ours are coming to the end of our 25-year stint. So I can't refuse people who want to do something for the environment to improve it, and I can't see any reason why that building cannot take PV tiles. It's a wonderful building, it's worth conserving, it's one of our 2,650 barns, and to me it's a treasure to be kept and looked after. Thank you. I can't support refusal.
Okay, thank you, Kath. I've got Matt Butler next, and then Bill.
Yeah, I think it's you know, obviously as a Green councillor, I'm going to be sitting here saying that I would be supporting PV all over, wherever we can, and I think that we should be doing things to encourage that in ways which minimise the visual impact. So, you know, absolutely don't put the shiniest ones on it that you can. But when you look at the landscape, you know, I can see that it is visible. But there are lots of things which are visible. There are lots of things which have a very detrimental impact on the landscape, which we support or which people do with permitted development. And so, you know, if having given planning permission for this to be converted into a domestic dwelling, there's going to have to be cables running to it. There's going to have to be, you know, we've already agreed with this being a domestic situation. There are going to be things coming in which solar panels is not going to be the biggest thing on this. Going back to Ken's point about the back of the building, if as soon as we've said there's going to be an extension, you can build an extension on this in whatever shape or form we've given approval for, we've obscured the back of the building. You know, the approach that they've come up with changes the landscape less than the approval that they've been given, because it will look the same as the thing which is there now.
Okay, I've got Bill next.
Thank you. I think it's certainly a very significant building. It's a fine historic barn in a very prominent position. Interesting, when you stand at the south elevation looking across the landscape, I think there's only one sort of farm shed or building that you can see, which is quite unusual in the Peak District. But it's so it's a very, very prominent position with footpaths and roads going past it. I think I'm just aware that the existing permission gives a significant and very acceptable amount of accommodation. It's got 4 bedrooms and and space around the building, and it also has achieved a design solution which, to echo what Ken says, allows the building to that fine building to be best appreciated and added to in a very sympathetic way. I think what's happened historically is that some, those materials have created some additional accommodation for the farmer, for their stock, and but it's not attractive at all what exists at the moment. So the planning permission, the planning consent, I think, is a good solution, and the present proposal would significantly detract from the landscape and the village and the conservation area. And we're not preventing, I think it's important that we allow especially local people to have their aspirations and to live locally, but we're not preventing that because that exists at the moment. We're just preventing what is I don't think it's a very poor design solution in a very sensitive site, a very prominent site. I think the thing about the solar panels, that's almost a separate issue. It's been bundled together, but that can be dealt with separately. That shouldn't be the sort of determining factor, and that perhaps could be subject to further discussion and conditioning, so that those aspirations can be met. But I would move to refuse the application.
Okay. Can I just ask, what are the roofing materials without the panels?
Sorry, of the roof or the panels?
What are the actual roofing materials proposed?
So it's proposed to have a stone slate roof as part of the existing approval.
Not a slate roof?
No, the lean-to would have a slate roof, but the main roof would be stone. Okay.
Thank you. Any other members wish to contribute to the discussion? No? Have I... sorry. Yes, by all means.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we engage positively on the solar panels issue. I think we've got problems with the design of this and the clash with those traditional materials. If you make an attempt to try and incorporate that on the landscape side, so the readability of that building as a traditional feature is most important from that context. I think there are other options. I think the officers have tried to have discussions already about whether there's scope for other placement around the garden area. At the very least, our design guide encourages strips of solar panels at the bottom edges or the top edges. I think arranged right in the middle, I think really disrupts the attempt to bring back that character. So I think that needs further discussion in itself. And I agree with Bill. I think it shouldn't impact on the principle of the development, but I think there's a much better solution for those that actually then allows that whole readability to still stay intact. And we've got the balance we're looking for of those major climate change objectives and national park character objectives. We're trying to mesh those together.
Yes. Matt.
Yeah. Sorry. I think coming back to the, we've seen on a number of occasions where people have said that we should be putting solar panels on the ground. We should absolutely not be putting solar panels on the ground if we can possibly help it, because that's all removing land within the national park. We should be working out mechanisms for how we can put them on buildings, on car parks, on wherever. We should, because otherwise we're losing land within the national park. That's going to be taking space. That would be taking space away from living space, where and putting it in when it could be on unused effectively unused space. So I find it really difficult because we keep getting pushback to say we should be putting solar panels on the ground. There's a much better way. Roofs are the much better way of doing it than on the ground.
Yes.
Can I make one final comment, just picking up on what Matt says? I don't disagree with him in general, but I think as we are always being reminded that we need to look at planning applications in their own right, in their particular circumstances, and I think this is one of those circumstances where we aren't going to be losing, if you like, dwelling space. The negotiations, as I understand, that have taken place so far, have been for an array within the bounds of the curtilage, the proposed garden area of this dwelling, and I think in these particular circumstances, because of the prominence of the building in the landscape, that would be a more applicable option, and it conforms with our design guide, which is the location of the ground location of solar panels is mostly recommended within settlements, in gardens, within areas that are already, if you like, domesticated, rather than out in the middle of nowhere. And I think the kind of armadillos that one gets in the landscape where whole fields are taken out, yes, there's a case to be made for not going down that road in a national park. But I think with this one, there's scope for negotiation, there's scope, I think, for moving to a ground mounted array, or, as Brian has said, somewhere a different location on that roof, perhaps. But I just feel that the Bill has made reference to the design of the proposed lean-to, the fact that it's on the north side, that it's looking into and is being seen from the conservation area with the constraints that I think that needs to have applied, are all reasons why I don't think we should be approving this. And I'll move the recommendation, Chair.
Okay, that's moved. Is that before I move on, is that seconded? Just to get it out of the way, that's seconded. Andrew Hart.
Chair, I remember an application where, and it was on the 515 at the junction there with the farm, they wanted solar panels, and officers argued that they should be on the roof of the buildings, the farm buildings. The committee took a different view, that the buildings weren't strong enough to take with snow load solar panels on the roof. So we have a contraire recommendation there. So really confuses me. You know, CC1 we've had pushed at us continually, and people who don't do sufficient CC1 measures are really marked down for that. And this application looks as if they are actually achieving that carbon saving. So I'm, really quite confused about this. We need to be consistent about policy.
If I can, it does seem to me that to put a brand new stone slate flag roof on top of a barn like this and then to cover it with solar panels seems to be a bit counterproductive. And one does wonder whether there are different roofing materials that might enable the roof to absorb the solar panels without creating the problem that this does. Aesthetically, I have real problems with that. Not just on the building itself, but in the landscape as a whole. When it comes to the extension at the rear, I do think in the future, we've got to be a little bit more imaginative and a little bit more broad-minded about the way in which we approach these things. I still have a slight feeling of guilt about the one we refused at Hathersage, where the corrugated iron shed was going to be some sort of hut, and it was an imaginative idea that was very green and tackled some of the issues about embedded carbon and all these sorts of things. And I really don't have any problem with the idea of making use of a corrugated iron structure and converting that into a house where it's part of a landscape that exists and where that can be done to a high standard of design. Whether, I mean, I think the particular problem here is the extent of that roof and the way it's, you know, how you might interpret it in the landscape. Whether this is exactly the right solution or not, I'll leave other members to determine. But I think we should think a bit laterally occasionally about how we approach some of these things. And then I saw a hand go up and I said, Mike.
Patrick, you were thinking along the lines that I was, particularly in relation to the stone roof, because yesterday we saw a slate roof there. I don't.
No, it's a corrugated.
It's corrugated all the way around.
Yeah, it's corrugated iron roof at the moment.
So do we know what materials were used there back in the 1900s?
I've just asked the question. They're going to be stone flags.
There was stone flags.
That are going to be used on the
Yeah.
It'll be the newest old barn in the county.
Which is a bit of a contradiction, isn't it?
Okay, right. I have a motion to refuse, proposed and seconded. Are there any amendments to that motion? In that case, I must put it to the vote. All those in favour of refusing it on the grounds set down in the report? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All those, right, so that is lost. Can I have another motion from someone? Eugene?
Can I move approval, please?
You're going to second it? That's moved for approval and seconded. All those in favour of... Oh, conditions. Well done, well done. Do you need conditions?
You have to repeat them on a section 73. So Hannah's got some prepared.
Right.
Thanks, yep. So in terms of the existing permission, condition 1 would remain, that's the time limit. Condition 2 would be varied, so that reflects the approved plans. I won't list you through every existing condition, but conditions 3 to 14 will remain. Condition 15 is for stonework, and that required a sample. So there is some stone around the base of the lean-to. So I'd say keep the requirement for the stonework to reflect the existing, but remove the need for a sample because it's quite limited. Conditions 16 to 23 would remain. And I would just add 2 additional conditions. 1 for a specification for the finish of the solar panels, and 1 covering the updated ecology report and their recommendations, which just includes some additional mitigation.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, so that is the proposer and seconded. That's Jean, and I can't remember who seconded it now. Kath. Are you happy with those conditions? The proposer and seconder? Good, right, okay. Now, is there anybody wish to propose an amendment to that motion? Right, Bill.
Just in terms of solar panels, because I think that is a separate issue. I think there could be no more discussion around that, because I think that's been identified as a problematic area as the application exists. So I would put some condition in that it would be subject to some further discussion as.
Can I just take advice on that? We can do one of 2 things, can't we?
We can, if the decision is to approve, then we are considering the application that's before us. I don't think it would be reasonable to approve it with a condition which effectively withdrew the permission for the solar panels and said that a scheme must be negotiated for something else.
I don't think he's saying that.
Are you saying that you want the type of the solar panels and the finish to be agreed?
What?
Yes, I thought that's what Bill was aiming at.
Yeah, but you're happy, they're okay on the roof, but we need to agree the type and the finish. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you're saying we can't, there's no scope for anything else other than on the roof, then I think at least we should think about positioning and materials and so forth.
Yeah, Hannah's proposed a condition to do that, yeah.
Okay, are you happy with that? Are you happy with that, Bill? Okay, right. So, for the last time, are there any amendments to the motion? No. Okay, on that basis, all those in favour of the motion to approve? Okay, And those against? 1, 2. That's carried. Oh, 3. That's carried. And 1 abstention. Was there an abstention? Oh, 2 abstentions. Right, okay. So, are we now sure that we've got the decision? Right, okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and we'll now move on to the next item on the agenda. And the agenda item 7 is Snitterton Hall, Snitterton, a proposed storage lagoon. And this is going to be introduced by Gareth Griffiths, who joined us on the site visit yesterday.
Thank you, Chair. Just need to get familiar with how to do the... there we go. Oh. Just press the arrow button. There we go. Yeah, so this is a planning application for a slurry lagoon to serve Snitterton Hall Farm. You can see the farm complex and the site, the proposed siting of the lagoon. Currently vacant. This photo is to sort of show the site contextually in the landscape. This is taken across the valley from Ochre. I don't know if I can... there we go. The actual site is in this area here, by the trees behind this field boundary wall, the complex being above. Again, that's another photo from the vantage point of Ochre Road, looking across towards the site. This is the proposal. You'll see it was originally set close to the wall. It's been set further back to allow for some intervening landscaping. You'll see that marked to the upper left and to the north side of the proposed lagoon, with some intermittent planting to the east side. Oops. This is a photo I've taken looking across towards Ochre. The actual lagoon, it's from where I was trying to get the photos, the actual lagoon would be down in this location. This just shows the buildings looking across, the houses looking across the valley towards the application site. And the gate is where the access would be, the vehicle access would be obtained down to the lagoon. Sorry, heavy fingers. And this is the area in which it's proposed. Where the land sort of becomes a bit more levelled out. There is a gradual slope leading up to the farm buildings. This photograph, this is the proposed siting for the lagoon, and you'll see that there are public footpaths which pass up and look over this site from there. There is a public footpath traversing this field here, and the road, the Ochre Road, is in this location. This is the proposed structure. It's basically dug into the land and the spoil taken from that. So this is the existing ground level. So it would be dug out. The spoil would be therefore used to form an embankment around, over which there would be a safety fence. I think that was to 1.5 metres in height. That's the other elevation. So, yeah, the applicant is requiring the facility to meet with Environment Agency regulations with regards to slurry storage and containment. At the moment, the farm doesn't have enough capacity to be able to store all the slurry that it produces, and that means that to keep the capacity available, it has to be taken out, it has to be spread. Now that could be spread in not necessarily the most appropriate times of the year, and it's essentially wasting material. With this proposal, it will allow the storage of the slurry, so it can be used at the most appropriate times of the year for spreading, and just gives the farm that capacity that can meet its needs and meets the legislation that is in place with the Environment Agency. There's one point I just need to make members aware. I did make a typing error in condition 4 of the recommendation. You will see on that it says shall be approved in writing by the National Park Authority. The development shall thereafter not be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. That should have said shall be carried out in accordance with the approved plans. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker first, and that is Mr. Phillips. Thank you very much. You've been watching the proceedings, so you know how it works. Make sure the red light's on. Thank you very much. And you have 3 minutes.
We're good to go. Thank you very much. I'm Will Phillips. I'm the agent for the application. I was in two minds as to whether to come because it's already, recommended for approval, but I thought it would be helpful. This is so important to the farm that we put this in place, otherwise there would have to be a major restructuring. It's primarily as a result of the regulations. The Environment Agency enforce those, and primarily the nitrate vulnerable zone regs, which requires at least 5 months storage. More recently, the farming rules for water came in, and they in effect mean that we need to have 6 months. This is recommended by DEFRA, and certainly in my experience over the years that it's certainly desirable for most farms because it builds in a contingency. We're not allowed to spread from October through to the end of January, depending on soil types. So therefore, the farm currently is at risk of enforcement, and I did, about 3 years ago, a risk assessment looking at this option. We've reviewed the options. We've got the lagoon, which I believe is the least obtrusive on the landscape. It's almost, well, it's not almost, it is definitely the least cost. The alternatives would be a big tank that you see around the countryside, and also, or a concrete structure, both prohibitively expensive. Grants are available and was mentioned by some of the people who commented. The DEFRA funding means that you have to have at least 6 months and you have to have a cover on it. They are very, very expensive and would have put this beyond not beyond the reach, but it would have put a severe pressure on the business. We've had no objections, or we've answered the comments from the Environment Agency, Natural England and Environmental Health, who I would have expected, if they'd had any problems with this, then they would have been the ones to have done it, along with the ecology officer, who we're very happy to work with. We've put in a comprehensive, I hope, and we would change it, subject to working with them to provide adequate landscaping. We've had a costly and detailed air quality report by Redmore Environmental, looking at the impact of having a lagoon on this site, and they came back, and in fact Natural England didn't even bother to respond, which I find quite unusual. We will work with Environmental Health as well to make sure if there was a problem, then that would be acceptable to people who are worried. And therefore, I hope, and I'm sure the farm hopes, that you'll be able to approve this as it's a regulatory matter for the farm. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. As I say, we did a site visit yesterday. This is, I think, principally about landscape. Members. Andrew.
Chair, regulations change, things change. I would much prefer this scheme to a tank. I've seen plenty of those around, and they are obtrusive in the landscape. This is far less so, fully acceptable, so I move the proposal.
You're moving that, okay? Is that seconded? Thank you very much, Dermot. Right. Can I just ask about the protective conditions on this? It seems to me that, given the location it's in, it's going to sort of extend what you might think of the farmyard over a much wider area. And I'm a little bit concerned about sort of extramural activities developing around the lagoon as it's placed. Is there any condition that we can realistically put on to make sure that this is a facility in a field and not a facility that's surrounded by all the stuff that farmers surround things by?
Excuse me. Yes. Now, as the plan shows, the access down to this site is currently established as a track down. The proposal is obviously to make a more thorough access through where the gate is. Now, what that shows is that there will be hard standing here, but it's understood there will be none around the building, around the slurry lagoon. Now, having said that, we can attach a condition which would remove any permitted development rights for further hard standings and the like. Whether a farmer decides he wants to put a tractor in the field or whatever, we can't necessarily control, but we can certainly control through...
you can control things like outside storage, for example. Yes?
If I'm not sure what lengths you can prevent storage in a field if it's for the purposes of agriculture.
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to remove permitted development rights in terms of agricultural storage buildings in this field, that needs to be justified. Ultimately, this proposal is for the slurry lagoon. Like Gareth said, if we've got concerns of additional hard standing associated with the slurry lagoon, we can look at restricting that. In terms of preventing putting a barn or sheds, I don't think we could justify it in terms of removal of permitted development rights associated with this application. So obviously if the field at the moment is in agricultural use, if the farmer wants to use other implement sheds and whatever it might be, you can do that today, subject to the provisions of the PD rights. So yeah, I think that's...
So we could have an extra condition that will limit what they can do.
We can limit in terms of the hard standing. I think we have to be careful in terms of how many permitted development rights we can restrict under this application, however. So I don't think we can start restricting storage buildings, etc., which are not really linked to this application.
The proposer and seconder, would you be happy with the condition on those terms? Yes. Yes, okay, thank you very much. Right, Matt.
Yeah, the volume of the lagoon is obviously for 6 months storage of the slurry produced by the farm buildings at the moment, the scale of the operation at the moment. Is it appropriate for 6 months of the scale of the operation at the moment, or does it have contingency built into it to enable the farm to expand further?
I don't know whether it will allow the farm to expand further, but if the farm is to expand further, any further buildings or the likes that would need to be provided would have to go through the relevant process of consideration. And at that point, things like capacity levels of the slurry lagoon can be considered at that point. This is to serve the existing operation as far as I understand it. If it does factor in a certain amount of leeway, then if the farmer decided I want to put another building up, but I need to go through the prior notification procedure, we can then consider that, and it can be considered as a prior approval where the authority can decide whether to accept or refuse permission for that building. So there is still controls going forward.
Yeah, I'm not sure that there are. I'm not sure that is really controls, is it? Because so you know, if this has got the capacity for twice the scale of the operation that we've got that there is now, it would mean that when this came back to that wouldn't come back to the committee, would it? That would go back to officers. That would be decided by officers, which would effectively, if we need to know whether this is appropriate for the scale of the operation there is now. Otherwise, we're saying that we think that this farm, the buildings on this farm, which I would contest as significantly more impactful in the landscape than the lagoon is. If it's got a capacity for twice the amount of livestock in the
Can we just answer this one first?
Chair,
lots of hands going. No, can we just...
Well, I've just done some maths is the thing. If as in the report it says the current capacity is 246 cubic metres, which is advised as being 1 month's capacity. 6 months of that would make that 1,576 cubic metres. We're advised that the capacity of the lagoon as proposed is 3,196 cubic metres. So it sounds as if there's significant leeway built in. I was trying to answer Matt's query, you see, Chair.
That's fine, thank you very much. Yes. No problem with that, is there?
Well, as I say, the lagoon will be able to take further capacity. But for that capacity to exist, it has to come in the form of operations on the site that will generate that level of additional slurry. And those buildings will have to be assessed through the prior notification submission. Yes, I appreciate that doesn't... those applications won't come before committee, but we will be having a look at those to see what their impact is in the landscape contextually to the existing enterprise, as we would with any agricultural enterprise where it's looking to expand. We would make an assessment of what is the harm of putting those buildings in the landscape. There may be opportunities, for example, to put a building at the back towards the back of the site, where it could be. So you're just trying to.
No, I think we can see that. From
Yeah.
Yes.
So there may be scope for buildings here that feed into that. It doesn't suppose that there would be buildings put into this environment whereby there could be considered to be visual harm of encroachment into this space. But that is an officer's judgment. Should we get any further such prior notifications?
Okay, well, I've got Kath next. I'll put you last, Andrew, as you proposed it. I'll do Kath, Ken Richardson, and then Andrew, and then I'll reach some sort of conclusion on it. Right, Kath.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I'm very concerned over comments on page 30. At the top is number 19, South Darley Parish Council states, the open slurry lagoon could be a potential source of air pollution and insect infestation, and Natural England has noted that a comprehensive air quality assessment with particular reference to emission of ammonia gas, which is harmful to certain flora, has not been provided. And then in the officer comment, his final response is still objects, wish to reiterate previous comments over the open nature of the slurry pit and the potential for air pollution, emission of ammonia gas, odours and insect infestation. And those of us who went on site visit know how close the houses are in proximity to this, so I cannot support approval.
Right. Can we get an answer to one or two of those? The bit about the open top roof and the air quality assessment.
Yes. The concerns of the residents of Oka is that the slurry lagoon will generate odours, it will generate flies that will be a nuisance to their amenity. Now, that has been put for consideration. We have had the ammonia report. Natural England, we've gone through the assessment of the impact of such on local receptors that may be affected by such things, but there's found to be deemed to be no significant impacts on any protected sites in the immediate and wider area.
Okay, thank you. I've got Ken Richardson next. Bill, I really would like to wind this up. I'm going to do Ken Richardson first, and then, if you're going to be quick. Ken.
Yeah, my concern is there's a couple of footpaths on that map. Is there no possibility of public access to this slurry? And if there is, even trespassers, is a life preservers. I wouldn't want digging out if I fell in it, but that's not point.
Right, Bill, very quickly.
Yeah, I'm just very conscious that of sort of changing regulations. It implies we've had a few of these applications before us, and it's something that these proposals do change the landscape. And it strikes me that this is part of a theme that we just should be aware of, that there could be many more of these applications, and they make a significant change in the landscape. I'm very conscious of what Kath said then about the effect of the sort of hygiene effects and the visual and amenity effects. Also, the big elephant in the room is if we're providing big capacity, then, and I say this very guardedly, that animal husbandry is a major source of climate change, and there were colleagues here who are very concerned about that. So if we're building big capacity into these things, we're not. All these little things we're doing about biodiversity, net gain, are sort of being washed away literally by us building big capacity into things which have a very well documented effect on climate change. I know it's a difficult thing for us to talk about here, but because there's a lot of very genuine interest involved in the landscape in the Peak District.
Andrew, and then I'm going to take the vote.
Yeah, it's a response to a change in regulations. If I was a farmer, I would consider that regulations may change again. And it's this regulation regarding time storage that could change again, and they could require more. And I'd rather that we deal with it in this application, you know, fight the battle where it is, rather than encourage another application for another one next door to it in 5 years' time if the regs change. So I support this. It's better than a tower. I dislike towers. They're obtrusive in the landscape, and it's an ideal solution.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, the motion is that this be approved with that minor amendment in the reason for refusal set out in the report, or this be approved subject to that minor amendment set out in the report. All those in favour of...
Sorry, Chair, and the additional condition about removal of permitted development.
And the removal of permitted development rights. Thank you very much for reminding me. All those in favour? Anyone against? 4 against. Yes, you can. Okay, thank you very much. Now can we move on? Well, actually, it's 11:30. Would members like a 5-minute, well, say a 7-minute break? I apologise to the next applicant and their agent. We're going to have a very short break until 25 to by that clock. Right, members, it's 25 to 12. The next item on the agenda is the Quornford application, agenda item 8. Who's introducing this? You again, okay?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is an application, a similar application came before committee about 6 months ago. It's basically to convert, to basically utilise what is already a holiday let, but for it to be utilised as an open market dwelling. Some photographs of it. So there's a dwelling house which the applicant owns that don't live there, that's rented, and this is the converted building. Where this photo is taken from, there is a public footpath, although it's not particularly clear on the ground where it is. The definitive right-of-way of the footpath actually cuts up through here, but again, that's not clear. That's been referred to the County Council rights-of-way as to whether there's any issue on that. So that's a side matter. So this is the existing, sorry, I'll just go back again. That's the existing layout of the holiday let. And the proposal is to extend off the back of the building to form an additional bedroom. So that's the existing front. Proposed isn't changing. That's the existing side, and that shows the projection of the extension away from the building. Oops, too quick. That shows the extension looking straight onto it, set in from the end elevation. And that shows it from the other side. I'll just go back and right. So the previous application proposed the extension here. Now that application was refused for 3 reasons: the potential impact on amenity of bringing an extension over to this point and in proximity to the house. Obviously, that reason for refusal has been now addressed by proposing to put it this side. However, there were 2 other reasons for refusal. One is that the design of the extension on this simple linear building is harmful, but of more importance is the principle of the conversion of the building to an open market dwelling house. This building is already converted, it already has a use, and therefore there's no presumption in this being a conversion of a agricultural building into a dwelling house. To that end, the officers have suggested that the applicant may want to consider looking and exploring the potential use of the building as an affordable dwelling house, but we have been advised that they want to not explore that route and that it's to be considered as an open market dwelling. In that regard, officer's recommendation is for refusal on the grounds of contrary to planning policy for the use of the building as an open market dwelling, and for the harm that is would be caused by the proposed extension to the character and simple character and appearance of the building.
Thank you very much. We have one speaker, Mr. Dukesall, who I think is already in place. You've been watching the proceedings, you know how it works.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. We're here to discuss a revised application to extend a one-bedroom holiday bungalow into a two-bedroom dwelling for full-time occupancy. The property is in a remote, high-altitude location near Flash Village, making it difficult to access, particularly in winter. The original barn was converted into a holiday let approximately 20 years ago, but it's only rented during the summer months due to safety concerns related to its location. The applicant, a widowed farmer, lives a mile away in Flash Village and struggles to maintain the property. Due to the challenging location, her limited time to care for it, she has applied for a change of use to allow full-time occupation. The officer report suggests that this change is acceptable if the property is designated as an affordable dwelling to meet local housing needs, but it would be needed to be managed by a statutory registered landlord such as Peak District Rural Housing Association, and correspondence with these and others will prove that they do not take on existing buildings. However, the property's small size may make it difficult to find larger tenant for long-term occupancy, as it may not meet the needs of a larger family or those requiring more space. Additionally, securing a social landlord for similar projects in the area has proven very difficult, which would impact the viability of this condition. Furthermore, the Peak Park is currently conducting a survey among local residents to gauge the demand for new housing in the village between the village hall and the former school. This suggests that there is a growing interest for addressing housing needs in the area, which may strengthen the case for introducing affordable housing options, such as the proposed change of use for this property. This revised application raises more considerations regarding the challenges of maintaining properties in isolated locations where the difficulty of securing affordable housing solutions. While the size of the property may limit tenant options, the ongoing survey reflects a demand for new housing which could support the proposed change of use if it aligns with the local community needs. To avoid potential extended periods when the property is vacant whilst tenants who fit the criteria are found by a social landlord and vetted, or worse still, it becomes unviable to maintain the property for a holiday let and it remains empty and falls in disrepair, we respectfully request that you consider this application on its merits for approval, allowing the applicant to manage the tenants either in its entirety or a condition to redesign the extension to provide the additional bedroom. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I wonder whether you could just stay there a moment, because I'm not sure that I understood something that you were saying. You said that that if we insisted upon it being an affordable house, you'd have to have a registered social landlord. Where have you got that from?
Previous applications that we've done, we've always had to have somebody that actually manages the vetting of the tenants.
The requirement, I'm a bit muddled with the presentation you made, because the requirement that we would have is that the first occupier would be somebody from the parish or from an adjoining parish who was in the definition we have in our policies in need. And you appeared to be saying that there was a need for affordable housing in the parish because that's what they were looking at in Flash and so on and so forth. Why would this dwelling not be able to contribute to that?
Well, it's very small at the moment, and
but some people need small. I mean, a young person living on their own or whatever.
Yeah, but they've still got winter clothes, summer clothes, that sort of thing. There isn't any room for storage aside from a suitcase for a long weekend, that sort of thing.
Okay. So you're saying that even if there's a need in the parish, this property wouldn't meet it?
Yeah, for a start-up family,
okay.
Yes.
Members?
You asked the question I was going to ask about the registered social landlord issue. I'm still not entirely clear on what that is. But but quite apart from anything else, I mean, it seems to me that we're caught between two elements of our own policy. On the one hand, as we rehearsed with the Lytton building, we use conversion of a traditional farm building as a form of conservation, and that has been done. But because that's been done, it's now done, and we can't therefore entertain a change of use. So we're kind of caught between those two elements. I'm not entirely comfortable with the proposed extension, but the other thing that I was unclear about, Chair, is the CC1 response. Again, not clear what is being proposed in paragraphs 54 to 57. I acknowledge that electric storage heaters are expensive, but is it entirely appropriate to replace them with a LPG or oil-fired boiler? Could we not be looking at, for example, if this was approved, air source heat pumps and things like that? I think it's up for grabs. I'm not clear at all what is being proposed to conform with our policy CC1, and I take the point that you've made, Chair, that small properties are in demand for singletons and the rest.
I do have to say that up here, on the moors around Cornford, is not the place where I would use that sort of heating.
I'm not an expert on heating, so I'll go by. But I think if this is suitable for, if as it exists, it's suitable for holiday lets, then I'm not convinced that it isn't suitable, say, for a single person to live there. And demonstrably, someone rents the other property and lives there all year round. So,
okay, Andrew, and then Dermot.
Yeah, very confusing, this one. It's sort of my patch, I suppose, as such. I think it's I'm not being derogatory, but it's a messy application. A lot more thought could have been put into this compared with what has been, particularly over the CC1 and the heating. I pick up on Ken's point there. There are other alternatives that could be used. I'm not technically against an extension, but I don't think this is the extension that is required on this building. It's something else necessary, I think, a different design. But I think I would really like to see this deferred and go away and come back with a better scheme. I think there is potential, for it to be let as an affordable local needs property, but in a different format, please. Just not suitable at the moment, but I don't think it's a complete basket case as such. It just needs a little bit of rethinking, I think, or quite a bit of rethinking. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dermot?
Thank you, Chair. Just listening to what Ken said about air source heat pumps. We always seem to be told that it's really only modern buildings that really suit that system as an alternative heating situation. So I think they're pretty limited, really, to oil or LPG or whatever. So I think I agree with Andrew that maybe this should be deferred and a better scheme should be brought back to us to consider. It's obviously very limited as a holiday let. I could see that, but I'm interested to hear what other people have got to say.
Any other member wish to speak? Ginny?
Only to support what Andrew and Dermot have said. I think we need to be looking at this as local housing, so I would support deferring and coming back with a more applicable scheme.
Speak.
Yeah, I think we just need to clarify that our policies do give scope for individual properties to go for affordable housing. You know, there's no requirement for that to be managed by a registered social landlord. And what this could produce is a more affordable property in the area. And that is the need of the area, not to drive the general market demand. So that is the need set out in the local plan, you know, either to drive conservation benefit or to achieve some of the needs of the area. So we just needed to satisfy that. And also that the nature of Flash and Quornford is actually quite different to some of the other villages in our plan, in that it's more scattered. You know, it is a small population. I mean, it was accepted right from the early 2000s that we could accept that as quite different to some of the other villages because it was the nature of that community. It was more scattered. So actually finding properties within that landscape is still important.
I'll get you, Ken, just half a second. This survey that we were hearing about in Flash Village, were we aware of that?
Sorry, I'm not aware of any particular survey.
We need to know a bit more about that, actually. Ken?
Just to say, Chair, that if, as seems to be the tenor of members' direction of travel, that members will be supportive of this being a local needs property, this application is for an open market dwelling. It seems to me that we have to refuse this along the lines of the recommendation in order to, as appears to be from the report, that the applicant acknowledges that that was our direction of travel from officer level, but they wanted this determined as an open market dwelling. So it seems to me we have to refuse it in order to get the message across that our very definite preference would be for moving it as a local needs dwelling.
I think I probably might agree with that, actually. Right. Can I have a motion, please, from somebody? You can move the recommendation. Thank you, Lee. Bill? Oh, right, that's been seconded already by Lee. Are there any other members who wish to comment on this? In that case, I'll put that to the vote and that it be refused on the ground set out in the report. But I hope we would look a little bit with the applicant, because I'm sure somewhere here we're getting near something or other, but as this application stands, it couldn't be approved. Right. All those in favour of refusal on the ground stated? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? Two abstainings. Okay, thank you very much indeed. We'll now move on to Fryden, the house at Fryden at Newhaven. And I think, Gareth, you're dealing with this as well. Have you taken over a new job?
Sorry, yeah. Right. This application, as you can see from the slide, this is an application to repurpose what was historically dwelling houses, which over the years have changed in relation to the actual works complex. I'll just try and So this is the building in question. If you look to the northeast of that, there's another building. That is currently a dwelling house. So that is under the ownership of the Fryden Brickworks Company. This part of the of this overall building here is referred to as House A. Now, we feel there's enough evidence to suggest that has always been continuously used as a house. The area, what we're looking at in terms of the application, oops, got the plan. Sorry, that just shows the location of the house, of the building there, this being the factory complex, this being the occupied neighbouring dwelling. I'll just go through the photographs. So they're in the process of renovating this building. That's the frontage. And these are essentially the elevations. and that's the existing layout. Right, so you see the area not surveyed, they consider that to be a dwelling at the moment, and that's never been lost. We've seen tenancy agreements to that effect. These elements have been used for office space. Now, what they want to do is they want to repurpose these as residential units. Now, in normal circumstances, you would say, well, if you're converting a building to two dwellings, one could potentially be a dwelling, but the other one would have to be an affordable dwelling to meet with policy. However, that is not what's being proposed. Given the nature of where the property is, where the building is, and given the proximity of the industrial site, the applicants are looking to retain these within their ownership, as they do with this, and that they are comfortable to accept a condition that these are only used by workers or people associated with the operations of the complex. That is not fully in accordance with development policy, but nevertheless officers feel that an exception can be made in this case, given that it would be sustainable reuse of the building in a sustainable location for workers associated with the site.
Thank you very much. Right, we have one speaker, Caroline. Oh, you're there.
Morning. I only registered to speak in case there was any need to explain the exclusion of what was called House A from the application. But I think Gareth's covered that off, so I don't think I need to add anything other than this application just really helps DSF in terms of their staff retention. So it's important to them as a business. Yeah, I've got nothing more to say than that.
Thank you very much. Well, we've been told this is not fully in accordance with our existing policy. I might say it's not in accordance with our existing policy at all, but it is perfectly simple and straightforward. It makes complete common sense, and I'm happy to propose it from the chair. Second it. Is anybody else going to argue about that? All those in favour? Anyone against? Thank you. That's carried. Are you talking about the members or the items? The next application we have is agenda item 10, and it'll be followed by agenda item 11 by the same applicant, which is the Hume End caravan site. The applicant is actually our speaker, Mrs. Dillon. Not Mrs. Sue Green that's at the top of the page here. So who's presenting this? You're doing it, John.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay.
Yeah, so this application seeks planning permission to change the use of an improved warden's accommodation, which is above an existing toilet and shower block, to a one-bedroomed holiday let at Upper Hurst Farm camping and caravan site at Tinman Lane, Hume End. You just touched on it. I was going to make that correction, which is in the report the applicant states to be Mrs. Sue Green, whereas in fact it is Mrs. Amy Dillon. Miss Amy Dillon. The second update is that the red line, as shown on the location plan, has been amended. The red line has now been reduced so as to only include land associated with the caravan site and its operations. The correct plan is on the screen now. The application has been referred to committee as the parish council have stated that they object to the development, which is contrary to officer recommendation of approval. So I'll move to the slides. Already on the first one. So the application site is located in open countryside. It's approximately 1 kilometre to the southeast of Hume End. The original farm and associated stone built outbuildings lie adjacent to the Beresford Lane. So that's down here. And that's Beresford Lane running along north to south. Oh, sorry, Timber Line even. Beresford Lane is the A road further up. The Torn caravan pitches are located to the southeast of the site. So here. So this is the block plan. So this is the toilet and shower block with the warden's accommodation above, which is to the eastern edge of the group of buildings which make up the former farmstead. So this is the front elevation of the building subject to the application. This was approved in 2011. So though relatively modern, you can see it's constructed in a traditional manner. On the southern gable of the building is a lean-to structure which serves as the reception for the site and a covered porch area. Just here. So this is the northern gable, and you can see the staircase that leads up to the accommodation above. And this is the southern gable showing the reception area, the timber lean-to. You can see a close-up view of the rear elevation, and then a wider view of the rear elevation. So you can see the existing roof lights that would serve the existing accommodation and would serve the holiday let. The flue in the centre of the photograph is unauthorised. The applicants and obviously the agents are aware of that, and that would be a subsequent application to regularise that. So this is the existing floor plan. So this is the ground floor. So this is not subject to the application, but just for context, you can see it provides the toilet and shower block to serve the wider caravan site. And then this is the first floor, which is what we're looking at today. You see the single bedroom, ensuite, kitchen, living, dining room area. So here, this is the proposed front elevation. So we can see 3 roof lights are proposed. Members would have noted on a visit yesterday that there were previously 3 roof lights in that location, which have been subsequently blocked up. So this proposal would reintroduce them to provide obviously further light to the accommodation upstairs. And then this is just a cross-section drawing showing a section drawn through the building. And then in terms of any other physical changes, the building would remain unchanged except for those roof lights. I'll now provide a brief recap of why the officers are recommending approval. So if I go back to... Yeah, so the existing touring and caravan site already offers holiday accommodation, and therefore this holiday would represent a small scale and sustainable improvement of its offer in a manner that would accord with policy RT3 of the core strategy. The current use is residential, and the change now proposed does not raise any concerns regarding the appearance of the building, or the first floor is residential, sorry, regarding the appearance of the building, impact on the wider landscape, or upon neighbouring amenity. The occupation of the accommodation will be restricted to no more than 28 days per calendar year by any person, which will prevent the intensification that would generally arise with full-time residential use. The application is therefore recommended subject to the conditions outlined in your reports pack. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have...
Yeah, thank you. I was expecting to talk about the other application that we've got first, but I'll obviously read my speech for this one. On the 30th of June last year, we had a significant fire, which has meant that we've had to remain closed. The 1-bedroom apartment we have was built above our existing toilet and shower block. So as an existing building, it has no additional impact on the landscape. The structure itself was meticulously thought out, and stone steps were sourced from York to emulate the stone steps of barns characteristic in the area. We care about minimising our impact on the national park, and we aspire to create beautiful spaces that reflect the landscape. We currently have permission to use the apartment for warden's accommodation, but moving forward, the apartment is going to become redundant. We'll be managing the campsite from the farmhouse. We are asking permission to use this space to host holiday makers. If we're able to do so, the income generated would help us to recover from the financial impacts of the fire over the next few years. For some figures, based on an 80% occupancy rate, which is conservative, considering the occupancy we already have in our existing cottage, and data from the State of the Park report, the apartment would bring an average of 142 new customers to the Peak District over a 12-month period. Spending an average of £304 per person, these customers would generate a further £43,000 for the local economy. This spending would benefit local pubs, cafes, shops and attractions. As well as the facts and figures, on a human level, we really need the additional income the apartment could generate. And I hope you'll consider this when casting your votes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, members, we did a site visit yesterday. I thought it was very straightforward. I don't know whether any other members had any problems with it, but I'm happy to move this one from the chair. It's okay. Has anybody else got any comments to make on it? Kath?
I was most impressed at the quality of the buildings on this site, and they should be commended for attaining such a high standard of building.
Okay, thank you very much. So on that basis, all those in favour... I'm sorry, have we... It's been proposed and seconded. All those in favour of supporting it? Thank you very much. Anyone against? No, that's supported. I think you might guess that you've got a fair wind. So you may want to think about whether you want to speak or not, or whether you'd like us to just move on. But we'll ask John just to introduce the item first, and then you can think about what you want to do.
Thank you, Chair. So again, same site. This now seeks permission for the erection of a replacement building for uses ancillary to the caravan site. Again, minor correction, the applicant is indeed Miss Amy Dillon, not Sue Green. Again, the application has been referred due to an objection from the Parish Council. So again, as you can see the slides with the location plan. Move on. So this is the location of the building, which has been obviously completely, utterly gutted, which you'll see now from the photographs. So photograph 1, 2, that. Yeah. So I think it's pretty clear the state of the building that was previously there. So the building that is now proposed. Well, actually, I'll just show you a drawing of what it looked like previously before the fire damage. You know, conventional barn, timber clads. So this is now what is proposed. So the replacement building will be sited on the same footprint with an overall height and mass similar to the previous one destroyed. Most obvious difference would be the incorporation of a pitched roof rather than replicating a Dutch barn style. Materials will be a mix of timber boarding and metal sheet cladding erected over random stone wall plinth. So again, that was what was previously stored. So you can see the curved roof as it was. And this is now what's proposed. This is the elevation beforehand, and now what's proposed. And then previously existing floor plan, and now what we see, what is now proposed. So activity room, kitchen laundry, plant room with a biomass boiler would be fitted, and then there would be an activity room and toilet and storage area upstairs. So I'll move ahead while we recommend an approval. It is considered the replacement building will provide improved recreational facilities ancillary to the needs of the business and will be of a scale that would relate well to the adjacent buildings. In addition, there will be no further impact on the landscape setting or neighbour amenity than previously existed. Subject to the conditions outlined in the agenda pack, including a condition that ensures it remains ancillary to the existing campsite and that the uses shall be restricted to campsite activity. The application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. I've been watching you, and you're obviously in a state of very considerable distress. Are you sure you want to speak? Because I don't think you've got any problems with this application.
I'm not going to speak. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In that case, I'm going to move this one from the chair. Any members wish to comment upon it? In that case...
Absolutely in favour of this. I'm just at a loss to understand the parish council's position on this. And
I would agree with you. I would agree with you. It's one of those applications which I think we could safely have kept at officer level, actually. But that's a discussion for another day. All those in favour of approval... Sorry, what's the matter?
I think Bill would just like to say something.
Who would? Bill. Bill, sorry.
To comment, I know that the applicants have been hit by quite a devastating fire. So I think, I personally, I'm sure we would like to wish them well with the re-establishment of their business, and I'll also move to approve the application.
Right. It has been proposed and seconded for approval. All those in favour of approving it? Anyone against? No, that is carried. Right, the next report we have is agenda item 12, the local draft validation list. And I warn all members that I shall be testing them on this at the next meeting. Would you like to introduce it?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is the one you've all been looking forward to. I'm sure members are all experts on the procedure for validating applications, so I don't really need to give much introduction to this. But essentially, we validate applications when they come in because applications must include certain documents before they can start the process. Now, there are basic requirements that are set by government, which is the basic things like the form, the fee, basic plans, sometimes a design and access statement, and more recently biodiversity net gain. But it's only those basic requirements that are set by government. So if a local planning authority wants to ask for any other documents at validation stage, we need to produce our own local validation list. And I'm sure our constituent authorities have got various versions of their own as well. And at the moment we have a very simple list which includes some of the basic things like a planning statement or a flood risk assessment, but there's a whole range of other types of documents that are sometimes needed for planning applications. Not always, but it would be good for us and for applicants if at the validation stage or before, at pre-application stage, everyone was clear what information they would need to submit with their application. And that's what really this is aimed at. It's a list which we can use as officers and applicants and agents can use to understand what they need to do. And when we give pre-app, we can use that list to show people with a tick checklist, these are the information that you need. And the lists are accompanied by a guidance document which is intended to give really a pointer to people about where to look for more information on it. The guidance document provides in basic planning terms what it is and when you might need it, and then it points you off to other places where you can get more information. For example, with archaeology, Ken will know that there's a lot of professional guidance out there about how you produce those documents. So it's not the intention of this guidance document to repeat all that, because it couldn't, and it would very quickly become out of date. But it's to basically explain to people in basic terms what an archaeological assessment is, when you might need one, and then point them to the relevant guidance that that professional body or organisation that has. That in a nutshell is what these two documents are. The intention is, well, we're required to go through public consultation, so the next step would be to do that, and I'll speak into our policy team about how best we can do that to make sure we engage the community and the agents and applicants that use our service, potentially also neighbouring authorities as well. And then once we've done that, we'll collate all the feedback we've got, create a final version, and then bring that back for committee to look at proper and adopt. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any members have any thoughts or ideas on this, apart from the chairman of the authority? Ken.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'll get rid of the first bit. Yeah, there are some typos and some grammatical things I'm quite happy to share with the relevant officer, if that's Adele. But on a more serious note, a couple of queries on the way things are expressed. I mean, for example, in 1.2 on page 96 of the overall document, it talks about this list is relevant for applications for district matters. Now, for perhaps agents, that's going to be clear what they mean, but for a house applicant, an ordinary member of the public, is that going to be clear? I just think we just need to, is that local planning authority or whatever? It's another form of words.
Yeah.
I'll just move that.
That's good feedback. Yeah, essentially, It might be better to say it in the inverse. Basically, what it means is it's not relevant for minerals applications.
Yeah, fair enough. And then in 1.7, it talks about getting in touch with the authorities' pre-app advice service to see whether to get some advice. Is that always going to be a charge, or is that a free element of the service? Again, I think for the benefit of applicants, it's something that could be clarified. It's a rather a long document, but oh yes, again, page 119, N2, location plan, and elsewhere with N1 as well. The final line is, it says 2 copies plus the originals are required, brackets, unless submitted electronically. So does that mean that 3 copies are still required, or just 2? Again, I'm looking for clarification. Yeah. So otherwise, it's just bits of typo things that I'm happy to share.
I look forward to your consultation.
Thank you for that. Bill?
Yeah, no, I haven't got any specific comments on individual bits, but I'm just aware that, just a general comment that, and I did pick it up, it said somewhere that appropriate to the size of the application, and a few more things like that I think would be good. I just find that people are frightened of the planning system, a lot of people, you know, and the planning system should be robust, and we're all part of that. But I don't think they should be frightened. It's a public service. It's there to enable development, enable proper development. So if comment, you know, if there's a possibility of adding a few more comments like that, I think it would help. I know I won't go into any details. We're involved in something at Hathersage Parish Council recently, where I got involved, and I'm just aware that everyone's quite in awe of the planning system, and it shouldn't be like that, you know. So if we can just soften it a bit by some words that we use, and I did pick up, I can't remember what section it was, I think it was to do with heritage statements. People are very frightened of heritage statements, I can tell you that. That might be a good thing, but you know, it's there for the public to embrace and access. So if we can just help with some wording somewhere along the lines, that would help, I think, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Any other members wish to comment on this document? Kath?
Again, 1.2 of page 96 mentions minerals. I wonder how many quarries and lands are still working are under the 100-year consents. We are now 83 years into it, so it's coming down when these quarries will be told in front how many are affected by this in the national park.
Well, they'll all be affected by it if they apply for planning permission, is the way I read it. They'll have to provide the right information. Well, this excludes minerals, doesn't it? So there's another separate list for minerals which they'll have to follow. But I'm going to guess also that there will be activities sometimes within a quarry that are not mineral extraction which will be covered by this. It'll be complicated. Okay? Right. So we're being asked to approve it for the purpose of consultation. All those in favour, and I'm happy to move that, second it. All those in favour, anyone against? That is carried. Thank you very much. And then the last report is the report of the authority solicitor. They keep changing titles. I don't know. Anything you wish to add to this?
Yeah, I'll just point out a couple of things. We've had expressed some concern about the decision at Barbooth, Edale, the eco-camping. We were concerned about non-compliance with policy, potentially the impact that could have if we saw more of those in more open settings in a valley like Edale, which is also a conservation area. We've actually taken council advice on that one as to whether there are merits to make a challenge. And there are some merits in policy referencing terms and going further with national park purposes. But I think there's also some learning points for us about how we take an initial report that we've brought to committee where we actually added to some of the arguments and the reasons for refusal, and then how we bolster that into the final appeal statement. And I think some of that was lost in translation, so I think we've got to learn in there to make sure that what we put forward to appeal is as strong and robust as possible. I think the minutes were quite brief on that occasion as well, so the inspector only had what was in front of them in terms of our rationale for harm. So there was risk areas in that if we were to go to challenge, and actually the same decision could be made, on the basis of what was in front. So we decided not to challenge that, but it's very important that the advice that we've had from council can actually feed back into our plan review process, because it tells us a lot about plan coherence. And if you imagine as well on that one, we've referred to core policies about permanent structures, which comes in our core strategy, and then what exceptions there are for that, for things like wooden pods and shaped huts in our development management policies. And there's about a 10-year gap between those documents, and there was references about how those two gel together and how the logic of one relates to the next. So I think that just tells us more about how we create a coherent policy position going forward. So that's useful learnings, and there's a whole council opinion that will be helpful there. The other ones that that have been allowed, there's a couple of examples again of renewables, and I think we just have to keep looking and learning about that, about how we can take a positive approach to finding those sites and those roof-based locations, or within the conservation area even, and try to be positive about that, because we're losing a few on these judgment cases. So we need to try and understand whether that's a fundamental point in our design terms, and actually is it a misunderstanding by inspectors? Sometimes we think they could have gone further, but I think it's just good learning again for the way that we try to engage positively on the citing of those issues. So Adam as well. Yeah.
Can I just add to that, Brian? That the last appeal there at Waterhouses wasn't actually a planning appeal. It was against a refusal of a certificate. So Charlotte might know more about that one, but that one was about whether whether solar panels could be installed without a planning application. So that wasn't actually on the merits of a case. It was just on the law, effectively.
Okay, thank you very much. Bill.
Just on what Brian just said about, I wasn't here for the committee decision which refused the eco camping at Edels. I did go to the site visit. Is it in order to so I wasn't here, so I didn't know what said, but you just implied that possibly some strength of feeling from the committee on certain applications, which this committee feels very strongly about. Is there a way that the committee in some way can augment and bolster your work by helping with potential appeals? Is that through minutes, or is that through some other actions? I'm just thinking that there's some scope there, isn't there?
The formal record is the minutes, and
Sorry?
I think the formal record is the minutes, and the inspector did use that, and there was just a kind of a one paragraph.
Yeah.
I think when we were trying to unpack that, it was really about what were the special qualities of the Edale Valley. What is the nature of the booths, and why is that important to a conservation area? And did we really, explain the reasons for that additional? We'd put in a reason about landscape harm, and we put a reason about policy, but I think we could have gone further, because the inspector didn't have that knowledge and have just gone on a kind of a wider range view. Was it harmful in the wider landscape? And actually there are some subtleties to that, I think, in that particular environment. So yeah, I think there's no harm in us rehearsing what those reasons should be that can then be recorded well in the minutes.
Yes, I think there was a particular problem at the Barber Booth one, actually, because we had a report which was saying that there was no landscape harm, and then we all went on a site visit and we sort of said, hold on, what's going on here? And the recommendation was actually changed, but the substance of the report wasn't. And so there was a difficulty in the way that particular case was handled. But the bottom line remains the same, that we need to learn that when the committee goes against the officer recommendation in some sort of way, that there has to be a process where the committee's view is properly communicated, whether it's through minutes or through some other mechanism, to an inspector, so that those views are made clear. And part of that must be the committee itself making things clear. as to what it's doing. Mike?
Yes, I've got a memory from that site visit where we articulated quite a lot about the landscape harm, but we didn't actually then translate that.
Well, the actual report was
into the
changed,
report.
but it was changed somewhat crudely, let's put it that way around, and it didn't really work.
Just got a thought. I mean, I think I agree with everything that's been said, but also in the event where members overturn a recommendation or introduce new reasons or new conditions potentially, what we could do when we're required to produce the appeal statement for the appeal, we could potentially go to either chair or vice chair or to the motioner and seconder and involve them in that process. And obviously then it's up to the members how much they want to be involved in that process. I mean, if there's a hearing, members can always attend that as well to express the views.
I think if I was the solicitor handling the case, I would say no. But that's entirely well. No, the job of the officers is to get the committee's decision through, and that's once you've instructed your solicitor, you rely upon, as it were, you rely upon them to make the case for you. Anyway, Bill, very quickly, because we're getting to. We don't want to go until 1 o'clock.
Very quickly, on the bank house, because so that's in Hathersage. What, as I understand it, that was the appeal against enforcement was dismissed, and that there's a sort of technicality there. There was no application to actually for the inspector to consider. So I'm just wondering what the present situation is, because I'll no doubt be asked at some point by people.
Yeah. So the appeal wasn't on ground A, so which is effectively that the inspector should grant planning permission. It was only on the ground that the steps required were excessive. I think that was the only ground. I can't remember what ground that is exactly in terms of the letter. So that's all the inspector could consider. And the inspector considered, because the development was the building, the remedy was to remove the building. And that it was as simple as that. But in terms of the position, the enforcement notice has been upheld, and that's it. So it has to be complied with now, and if it's not complied with, then we can potentially take further action.
And there's no appeal against that, is there?
Well, the appeal was the appeal. That's it. Unless the judicial review unless they were to JR that decision. Yeah.
Yes. Matt.
Yeah, it was a question going back to the previous conversation about the minutes, because I've looked at the minutes, the AM minutes, and they're quite brief compared to the ones that we have at District Council, for example. All the meetings are recorded. Do we keep records of those? How long do we keep the records of those conversations? Because it would be good to know. It would be good to have that, to be able to refer back to that and say, actually, this is what happened. I recognise that the minutes only need to be the length that they are.
Or even shorter. I mean, the purpose of local authority minutes is to record the decisions made, full stop. What you have to do is to relate them back to the report and to any new information that's come forward since the report was written, but otherwise they're there just to record the decision. And really, at the end of the day, when we put up our hands around this table, I'm going to guess that a lot of us are putting it up for different reasons. Some of us will think X is the important thing, and some of us will think Y is the important thing. What is important is whether the decision itself is justifiable. And trying to reflect all those different views in a minute would make life very difficult, I think. And I must confess, sometimes when I read the scripts in some of our minutes, I think, that's not quite how I remember it, but I'm not going to spend hours arguing about it, It's one of those things. Anyway, this report is to note. I'm happy to move it as to note. Is anybody happy to second it? Dan, that's seconded. All those in favour of noting the report? Thank you very much. Anyone against? No, that's unanimous. Thank you very much. And that concludes the meeting at 12:30.